October 17th, 2022, week in review. I'm gonna kind of take this one backwards, a little different than I traditionally do them. I'm gonna start with a couple things about last week, nothing significant I'm gonna report on in this format at least. And then I'm gonna dive into the comments and go through all of the comments from last week, and especially read through Max, the comment he had. I just skimmed it right now. The rest of the comments on this thread I didn't read. I typically don't read any of these comments when I answer them, but I wanted to see what he said. He wrote something really long, so I skimmed it, and I'll address that here. Last week we launched the CrossFit podcast with Stefan Roche. I shouldn't say launched, but reposted an episode. In reality, years ago, Sevans launched the CrossFit podcast, and actually even before that, years before that, we had one. Geez, I'm drawing a blank with who hosted it. Sorry, I don't remember who hosted it. But we had a podcast in the early days. We just didn't stick with it. Then it kind of took a side seat to everything else going on. And eventually, Sevans started it back up and did it for a number of years, stopped due to some internal pressure. And then we've been toying with it, and Stefan filmed a bunch of episodes. He's filmed a bunch of episodes basically since around the time I came back a few months ago. Flew him up here to the ranch. We sat down, we filmed a lot. He filmed one with me. I basically vetoed it. We're not gonna air that one. It was just a test run. And then he filmed one with Graciano, the one we posted, Kelly Starrett, Jesse Burdick, and I think that's all that he did here. Then he did a bunch at the games. So pretty excited about that. Stefan's really accomplished in the strength and conditioning field and the CrossFit world with everything he's done with us through the level ones and being involved in the training staff and having been around for a really long time. Actually been around CrossFit longer than I have. I remember early on when I was helping with seminars, I went to one of the early Bergner seminars down in Bergner's the high school he was coaching at, and Stefan was there, and he was squat snatching 135 with a single arm. And so that back then, I mean, even now that's impressive, but back then that was really impressive because not too many people were doing movements like that. CrossFit really brought the clean and jerk and the snatch to the forefront of society, at least training society. Back then, nobody was doing this movement. So to see someone do that, it was really impressive. So I'm excited about having him lead that effort and do the podcast. Hopefully we can get some good episodes out there that stimulate some of these discussions we're having here on methodology, because they need to be had, and kind of keep talking and get the juices flowing with some of these concepts. Speaking of podcasts, Faul, the new CEO of CrossFit, he was on Sevans' podcast this morning, I heard. I did not see it. I heard it was pretty good. I chatted with Sevans afterwards for a few minutes, but nothing crazy. So if you want to hear from our CEO from this morning, check out Sevans' podcast. He goes live with his podcast because I did a podcast with Mark Bell years ago, and he went live, and I didn't even know it was live until after the fact. He told me it was live. And then so when Sevans first started his podcast, I told him you should go live and you should experiment with that format. And he was really cautious, but then finally he decided to take the plunge and do it. I actually should be going live with this format. I just haven't taken the time to figure out how. I guess you just push live on YouTube, but for this, how I would do it. So I need to think about that, and maybe that's the next evolution of doing these week in reviews, is going live. There's no reason not to, because I'm not like scripted, I'm not rehearsing, I just pretty much jump into these. So the only difference would be there'd be all these comments coming in, and maybe that is worth it, just so I can kind of riff and answer some comments. So that was the big thing with last week that really excited about. So check that out. We have one episode up, and there should be more coming soon. So let's jump into the comments. I'm looking over here at the computer. So Erica Lobo, it was a pleasure having you in Brazil with us. You are CrossFit. Thanks for everything, especially for being my workout partner. Thanks a lot, Erica. We did this horrible workout together. It was tough. It was basically 20 chest to bar pull-ups, 1 round of DT, 5 rounds of that. The 20 chest to bar pull-ups, you share the work. The 1 round of DT, each of us, we do that, and then we go through 5 rounds. The DT, I didn't do 155. I was definitely lighter. Don't remember what it was, but it wasn't like 105 or 95. It was probably 125 to 145. And I used variable weight. The first round I used probably, let's call it 145. The next 3 rounds I used probably 125. And then the final round I went back up to about 145. Chris Beisterfeld, keep CrossFit hard. Word. Matt Mueller, 1 word changes it all. Relative to the athlete on that day, a weekend warrior, a soccer mom, a high performance athlete in a deload week, all relative to the individual. Yes, I agree. Hey Dave, Robbie Southers. Hey Dave, I think you should come up to Alaska and do a few drop-ins. Maybe time it during hunting season next year. Our gym owner is a registered guide and help you out with getting some big game. That sounds awesome. Shoot me an email. I'd be interested in that. Actually, this summer, an old friend of mine, actually he owned CrossFit Predation. He travels the world on a motorcycle. He invited me to ride up with him to Alaska. I'm seriously considering it. I don't know if I can pull off the time commitment, but I'm gonna look at ways that I can do it. And it'd be pretty cool to get an adventure bike. I might do it just to have the excuse to get a new Husqvarna, who I'm a big fan of. They have a new adventure bike. So maybe I'll say I'm gonna do it so I can buy that motorcycle and then actually not end up doing it, but I'll still have that cool Husky. On that note, some of you have seen my old Triumph Scrambler. It's not old, it's a 2014. That's all decked out. I took it in today to get worked on, so I'm gonna get that up and running. I have been riding my Road Glide, so I'm riding. Springer Blankenship, you talked about it, therefore it's CrossFit. Tim Hodges, I am soon to be a retired Navy commander with 34 years of service. I heard recently CrossFit is waiving the level 1 certification fee for all Army personnel and wondered if there are plans to do the same for fine Navy folks. Given your impressive background, Dave, and the fact one of the most well-known CrossFit hero workouts is named after Michael Murphy, thought CrossFit would extend the same offer. So thanks for your service, Tim. That is not what CrossFit is doing. CrossFit is not waiving the level 1 certification fee for all Army personnel. There's a program called Army Ignited, and basically it's a program where soldiers can apply to have their level 1 fee paid for by this Army program that I think encourages non-military learning or courses, so they have something to do when they get out, or an additional skill set. It's not free. If we did decide to do that for all Army personnel, obviously I would have pushed also for Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force, Marines, but it's a unique program. Brandon Waddell, thanks for breaking down that view and explanation of how the workout was CrossFit. I think it is a great way to demonstrate how adaptable CrossFit is for everyone and how it can look different for everyone. Infinitely scalable, as Greg said. Scaling doesn't always mean the weight or volume. It can be the intensity or time domain or not timing at all. CrossFit isn't always games level intensity. For the vast majority of the community, CrossFit looks more like what you explained. I appreciate it. Yep, I agree. Dami Aguirre. I think the movie you mentioned is City of God. Yes, so the movie I mentioned last week about the BOPE, the Special Forces group in Rio, is City of God. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Since it was shot in a favela with non-actors. That's what she said. Actually, on the flight, I told Don and Gary about it, and Don ended up watching it on the flight to one of our other cities, and he really liked it. So check out that movie. Robert Norris II. Instructor Castro, do you think Rogue can use Rogan's infamous iron neck photograph for the summer 2023 ad campaign? Sincerely, RWN2. P.S. Has there been a study done on Fran looking at VO2 max capabilities? There have been, but I don't know. I don't know the study results. I know some of the guys at Pepperdine did some stuff with a group of our athletes years ago, and even recently I saw a video of Tia doing some VO2 max stuff. Not necessarily Fran, but I use Fran to increase my lung capacity after smoking too much cannabis. So-called getting the iron out. P.S.S. 14, yep, City of God, the film. So Robert Norris II, since he called me Instructor Castro, I wonder he might have been someone I put through training, or he's just referring to the ways they used to refer to us in training. I don't know if Rogue can use the infamous iron neck. He must be trolling. I don't know. I know what that is because I've seen it pop in my feed, but ask Rogue. Don't ask me that. I would say no. Francine Govin. Shouldn't the swim deadlift workout also be considered through the lens of how age to establish its CrossFit legitimacy? At 82 years old, that workout would rock even if not for time. Shouldn't the swim deadlift workout also be considered through the lens of how age to age, maybe the how is a typo, to establish its CrossFit? Sure, yeah, absolutely. All of these have to be taken through the lens of age and your abilities and where you're at. There's plenty of people who are 60, 70, 80 who would take that workout and crush it at the same weight with the same distance relative to what I'm capable of doing it. Nick Gilbers. The current CrossFit prescription constantly varied high intensity functional movement. A better prescription, in quotations he put mine, intentionally varied multi-intensity functional movement. CrossFit is everything, not everything is CrossFit. That's why it's awesome. CrossFit is everything, not everything is CrossFit. I won't say CrossFit is everything. There is very much stuff that is not CrossFit. Not everything is CrossFit. I do agree with that. So I don't agree with CrossFit is everything. That's this realm, once we start saying CrossFit is everything, that starts getting it into this weird camp of like, you guys are just trying to claim anything and everything, and that's not what we're trying to do. In regard to the prescription, we'll come back to that. Rodrigo Jaspic. It was an honor having you here in Brazil with us and meet you in person. I asked if you had an idea of how important you are in the changes of lives of so many people around the world. As a doctor, I thank you so much for all the things you have done. As I told you before, those days will be unforgettable to me. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate the note. Kenny Christie, what about relative high intensity rather than high? Enjoy the question Max raised and encouraging healthy debate. I encourage and I enjoy healthy debate too. I'm also not opposed to getting into some unhealthy debate at times, but this is not the time, nor I don't have the desire to do that with this one. Karmik Nurat, consummate professional. Thank you, thank you. Johnny B, Crisis of Command by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller is a good read if you have the time. I typically don't read books like that. I might listen to it. Like right now I'm listening to Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I would never read the book, but I'd listen to it. And I'm very much like, books I listen to while I'm driving and books I read are two separate books. If I listen to a book, I'll never say I read it. So I have this weird like, I consider I read a book if I read it. And when I listen to books, they're separate categories. So Crisis of Command by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, I might listen to, won't read. Justin DiCarlo, anything can be CrossFit because it's constantly changing. Sometimes we lift heavy, sometimes we just run a long distance. You can argue anything is CrossFit because it's all fitness and CrossFit is all encompassing. Oops, just kicked my phone. Like I said earlier, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that you can argue anything is CrossFit. Again, because we need to put it in context of what you're doing day in, day out, and relative to what your goals are and the big picture. And so let's take curls, for example. If I were to start a program and I was doing curls on Monday and Tuesday I'm doing fucking calf raises because I need to do calf raises, and on Wednesday I'm doing tricep extensions, etc., 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 and I'm doing that for months on end, that's not CrossFit. I'm not doing CrossFit, and that's okay. Now, you take a look at Rich or Dan Bailey or some of these guys, or, you know, a lot of these top athletes started doing some of that stuff as accessory work, or in Rich's case, just to improve his bicep composition, and Dan's case. That is CrossFit because it's part of their goals, especially when you start talking about doing it as accessory work. The argument there, and this is going to be a controversial one that I'm not going to dive too much in, is how needed that accessory work actually is. Let's not go down that right now. But so the someone doing curls or tricep extensions in support of their CrossFit training and their goals with CrossFit is that's part of the program, CrossFit. Louis Sevans, I think, kind of, when we went and did some stuff with him, kind of really highlighted the accessory components, and it felt like after we started working with him, our community kind of gravitated more towards the accessory movements than they had in the past. Anything is CrossFit, but with the right programming, or it's just random stuff one day after the other. No name for now. I don't have a lot of my WODs. I just work out as hard as I'm able to that day. Dave Castro's CrossFit. Blade King 2013. I think the high intensity portion is holding back CrossFit. I think it should be variable intensity, because too many take it as high intensity all the time and burn themselves out, not understanding pacing and not understanding training low intensity for the aerobic system. Someone said, I agree, 100% agree. Someone said trainers have to coach and program in an appropriate way to develop aerobic and anaerobic energy system. If too many members are taking intensity as high intensity, the trainer has to question themselves about their ability to explain the workout, or about the ability to program properly to make them improve. Someone else said, agreed. However, where would level 1 coaches learn that skill? It's been a while since I took my level 1, but that sort of thing isn't taught, if I remember correctly. Whose shoulders does that responsibility fall on if the gym owner coach is all about high intensity? Ultimately, it does fall on our shoulders in terms of educating and getting the right message out. There's definitely room and necessity for lower intensity efforts. You just can't go into the gym every day of the week and go at 100%. The coach and the affiliate owner and the trainer, they definitely need to know that and recognize that. And to a large degree, the individual needs to self-educate and self-regulate at times to make sure that they're not just crushing themselves. CrossFit is, so this is all still in this guy's thread. CrossFit is high intensity, but high is referred to the physiological and psychological tolerance per member on each day. That was what I was highlighting last week. High intensity for me after a bad day is different from high intensity after a good day, even if it's the same person. Yes, this is absolutely covered in level 1, both written and explained by seminar staff members, and they are open to answer any question if participants are willing to really learn the CrossFit methodology and details, and not only take the certificate to open a CrossFit affiliate and teach classes. Trainers have the responsibility to teach high intensity and to explain that high is different for every member in each day of his life. Federico, good job. That's a good response. Trish, nothing will take a man's testosterone faster than high intensity every day. Throw in poor recovery and you're asking for injury. Some Federico said, Trish, this is funny he said that because I don't have to say it. Trish, wow, such a scientific comment. I wouldn't have said that, but Blade King 2013, Red Eye, attending the aerobic capacity solves all of these issues. Robbie Southards, also known as relative intensity. On a recovery day, you could be at high intensity, but not have it comparable to what you usually do. I've seen either James Hobart or Austin M talk about the same thing. Trish, I get it. Overtraining is horrible on the body. Get a great coach and get a proper program that values rest as much. Okay, and then Federico came back, or someone else came back. I understand your point, and I agree with relative intensity, this physiological state of an individual on a particular day, but to lower the intensity goes for me more than that. Imagine my red zone is 155 beats per minute if I'm tired mentally. Okay, got it. I can't remember okay, hold on. Here's a couple other questions, or a couple other comments. I'm almost done, and then I'm gonna go max. Do you think CrossFit should support a level 3 prep course? Or do I like the idea? Yes, I do. And people kind of organically do this. I don't know if we officially have one. Do your kids shoot? One of my daughters does. We are actually just training, getting some practice in on some long range work. My other does not. Jeffrey Howard, what an awesome and wild talk. I'm all about the theory talk. And he's a level 3. John Woods, enjoy the journey, still CrossFit. Okay, it's 19:20 into this. Typically I'd end right about now. But for the final question, I'm going to dive into the Max Alhaj comment, and underneath it, you guys check it out, there's 15 replies. I'm not going to even dive into those because this has gone really long, but I'll dive into this in surface level, cover some of it. Let me get some water, my throat's dry. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I appreciate hearing how you think about the training. For the record, I didn't say your workout wasn't CrossFit. Okay, I didn't realize that. I apologize. I suppose I will explain why I asked the question. Oh, maybe he asked if it was CrossFit. Okay. For many years, there have been many experts in the CrossFit world talking about lower intensity training to improve. Hinshaw is an example. In his CEUs, he might encourage walking and running intervals to maintain stimulus. Bergner and CEUs emphasize working with an empty barbell or PVC pipe to refine your technique is another example. Additionally, many games athlete coaches use intervals. Matt Frazier talked about how much zone 2 endurance volume he does after retired. So in that first paragraph, lower intensity to improve training, I agree with. But the examples, so walking and running intervals to maintain stimulus, yes. Bergner and CEUs emphasize working with an empty barbell or PVC pipe to refine your technique is another example. Yeah, but that's also always been part of our way of teaching and exposing people to the functional movement, specifically any movement actually, is working with light load to no load. And in this case, in the case of us, it's been criticized, like, oh, we only use PVC pipe or we don't use load. In this case, it's being praised for how Bergner uses it, which it should be praised. And in the case of how we use it too, it should also be praised, because starting with no load is critical to getting people up to speed to perform the movements correctly when they add load. Additionally, many games athletes coaches use intervals. But see, so I don't think of intervals as the same thing, unless I'm thinking of it wrong. But I will say this, and intervals have also always been a part of the program. From as long as I've been doing CrossFit, early on, Greg would program a lot of interval. Like, you look at some of the old workouts, there was plenty of do something for 3 or 4 minutes, rest 3 minutes, 5 rounds and there was plenty of workouts where you would go really hard, maximize the intensity, rest and recover really hard on 1 round, and rest, recover, and then hit them again. Even something like, this is going to be a bad example, but it's all I can think of right now. Mary, do 1 round of Cindy, rest, and go as far as you can, or even go for a fixed amount of rounds, 20 rounds. Hit it hard, rest, hit it hard, rest. And that type of training has been in CrossFit for a number of years. So those concepts, generally speaking, aren't foreign or new to us. So lots of examples of people excelling while doing a lot of easy training. Although I don't think the training that Frazier did was easy. I think he did a lot of hard training. So it's clear from my vantage point that CrossFit really doesn't require intensity. I've seen many people succeed in classes never getting to an even high relative intensity. They may never be pushing 1 RMs, never trying to go as fast as possible on Metcons, but even operating at these low to moderate intensities all the time, they get great gains as amateurs. Agree 100%. And the magic is in the movements. The art is in the programming, and the science is in the explanation. And I think what we're both saying there is the magic is in the movements. And so just doing functional movements for a lot of these people, even if they're not maxing out intensity, they're gonna see a lot of results. So never pushing 1 RMs, never trying to go as fast as possible on Metcons, all of that, they're still doing functional movements, they're still getting the results, they're still getting the stimulus. And I will say this, Max, I've seen many people succeed in class never getting to even a high relative intensity. Maybe perception-wise, but for that individual in execution, it is relatively high. It might not, to us on the outside, we might not perceive it that high, but to them it might be. So don't quite agree there, conceptually agree with the statement in general. However, one of the most fundamental components of defining the methodology is the catchphrase, constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. Catchphrase, more of a defining term for our program. So something that we anchor off of in terms of describing it to the world and teaching concepts. I personally think the phrase is outdated and lacking truth. For example, constant variation. In theory, we want to be constantly varied, but in application, we reduce down from the infinite number of movements we could do in fitness and spend most of our time in MGW style movements. That means throwing, striking, dancing, martial arts as examples never show up in CrossFit programs. If we were truly constantly varied, there would be juggling, combat, and a variety of other potential movements. Instead, CrossFit as a culture has reduced the number of movements down to probably 50 movements that take up 99% of all CrossFit programs over the internet from all sources. So it's not that varied. So we select our movements from movements that move large load, long distance, and quickly. And those are the movements, one of the characteristics of the functional movements that are gonna get us our most bang for our buck in terms of the magic being in the movements and the results that our clients get. So something like juggling, something like dancing, something like martial arts, something like throwing and striking, well, all functional movements for a fitness program to optimize the fitness aspect of it, we would rather use movements that move a large load, long distance, and quickly. So yes, we have taken all these different human movement possibilities out there and narrowed them down to those who get the most bang for their buck for us in terms of delivering results. And it's not to say some of those things shouldn't be in the program, but if we had a program that was based off of striking, dancing, and martial arts, it would be very different and appeal to a very different crowd. I'm not saying those aren't functional, and I'm not saying those shouldn't be played with, and if people have a passion for them, they should incorporate them, especially the martial, even the throwing aspect. If you're a thrower, you can get a lot of benefit out of doing CrossFit and even incorporating some throwing into it. So it's not that varied. There's a lot more variance in this type of training and this methodology than most others. So I disagree that it's not that varied. And constant varied, okay, let me talk real quick about that too. This isn't a point you made, but others do. Say that it's completely not thought through or not deliberate. That is not at all what we mean by constantly varied. We essentially mean mixing up the stimulus, changing the movements, not doing a Monday, Wednesday, Friday back buys, tries sort of thing, but like having a rotation of movements you're going through. The variance aspect is where I think people criticize, but it's okay to have less variance than traditionally thought you should have with the CrossFit program. So what I'm trying to say there is experimenting with something a little more fixed or routine, especially if you're still using the functional movements, is okay. And arguably a lot of programmers and a lot of people are minimizing the variance over a track of time to accomplish some goals. So if we are targeting having a great Cindy at the end of the month, there's a number of things you would do to help get you there. High intensity. As discussed earlier, you are one of the most badass people on the planet who has done CrossFit for the longest period of time. You were a Navy SEAL, ran the games, etc. So if you're doing lower intensity training, the best athletes are doing lower intensity training. And most of the affiliate owners I know prescribe for quality sessions or low intensity work, then it seems not to be a requirement of CrossFit. So I guess I got caught up in the praise. I don't understand. So if you're doing lower intensity training, the best athletes are doing low intensity training. Most affiliates I know are doing low intensity work, then it seems not to be a requirement of CrossFit. Oh, he's saying high intensity seems not to be a requirement of CrossFit. So at the end of the day, the high intensity, if the program was totally built off of constantly varied functional movements executed at low intensity, we'd be having this argument about high intensity being where all the results are and high intensity being the anchor of the program more so than low intensity. And I wouldn't fucking be here right now. And what I mean by that is the high intensity, for the most part, is where a lot of, like it or not, I'm not saying you have to live there, but being there 80 to 90% of the time, 75% of the time, whatever, is where the results do come from. And I say I wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be here because this program is where it is at in the evolution of fitness and the world because of the results, not because of the games, not because of any fucking fancy marketing campaign, because the program actually works and is highly effective. So high intensity is like an anchor for it, and a lot of people do it with high intensity. I don't think we need to clarify that with low, medium, and high intensity, or variable intensity. I think it's okay to have high intensity as that anchor word and just educate and understand that, yeah, there's times it's not always high. There's times to modulate and play at that, especially because it's different for everyone. Some people can tolerate high intensity more often than others, and so I don't agree. It is it's definitely a defining characteristic of CrossFit, and it's well positioned in that statement. Functional movement. I'll roll with this one and say that I like the concepts of core to extremity and multi-joint movements as the backbone of the methodology. I think that this is one of the core truths, and that has been the methodology from the beginning across all the ways people do CrossFit. Yeah, so even some of your examples above under variation, I would have said that should have been phrased under functional movement for sure. Our defining term, so we have a lot of descriptors for functional movements, but the term we anchor on is that they move large loads, long distances, and quickly. Core to extremity is one part of that. Multi-joint, compound, that's all descriptors, but it's not our defining term for functional movements. So I asked a question, this is Max. So I asked the question to highlight the contradiction to open the discussion. I think CrossFit, or constantly varied high intensity functional movements, is no longer a phrase to accurately describe CrossFit. I think many newbies go into the affiliate and go too hard too soon and burn out. They leave the gym and the coach doesn't necessarily yet have the knowledge or experience to understand that people need to build fitness over time to handle that type of sustained intensity. So I think new affiliate owners could be saved time, money, and customer retention for having a better concept of some of the programming nuance you covered in this video. I agree. So there's plenty of education that needs to be coming from us, from CrossFit, on these points. I do not agree that constantly varied high intensity functional movements is no longer a phrase to actually describe CrossFit. I think it's fine, it's okay. More education around it is needed, as you're suggesting, but also let's back out. Like, fucking Joe Blow isn't going into an affiliate tonight and for his first workout or for his 10th workout and like, all right guys, here we go. I know it's constantly varied functional movement at high intensity, so I have to go hard. No, most people, 99% of the people in a CrossFit gym probably don't even know that catchphrase there. So it really is on the coaches, it really is on the trainers, the affiliate owners, to convey the right message, to have a one-on-one interaction with their client and understand where they are in their journey and describe how much intensity they need. So what I see here, and you're saying it, we need to do a way better job educating the world on these topics. And I really, really, in my heart, believe that and want to make a change to make that better, and I will. But, and then he ends with this, but I also don't work for CrossFit. I'm not Dave Castro, so I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on the matter if you think I'm way off base here. I don't think you're way off base. I really appreciate the discussion. And if you think the level 1 methodology covers everything perfectly, I never said that, then I shall bow to your authority and respect you to do what you think is best for the brand. I think that level 1 does an amazing job. I think to say it does everything perfectly, that's silly. So what does anything perfectly, right? Like, think about anything in life that's perfect. It can always be better. There's always room for improvement. But I think it does a really good job at what it needs to do. This aspect of then what's happening at affiliates with coaches and with individuals and intensity, there does need to be some continuing education and discussion on variable intensity, essentially, and the application of all of these concepts. And I'd like to say the level 2 also goes a very long way in helping educate trainers on all these concepts, the level 3 especially, and soon to be the level 4. So we do have this nice pipeline of education, not to mention all the other courses, like you mentioned Bergner's, like you mentioned Hinshaw. We have online courses. So there's plenty of options for trainers and owners and coaches to educate themselves. The thing is, you just have to take the commitment and you have to take the step to actually desire the knowledge. So I'm just scanning. Someone said you should have a discussion with Dave. That would be fun. It would be fun to watch from a learning perspective. Well, that's it. Max, I really appreciate the discussion. I hope you appreciate this response, and everyone else. I think this theory, this aspect of CrossFit is exciting, so maybe I should dive into some of these topics more, and maybe I'll do that with Stefan on the podcast, because he'd be a fun one to push me on, and then maybe bring some people like Max in and others from the outside to continue these discussions. So this was definitely the longest week in review I've done yet, but well worth it for diving into some of these, and I hope the answers were okay to everyone. I didn't prepare, just ranted, so if you listen this whole way, I should send you a sticker or something. All right, thanks a lot, and put your comments in the comments, and next week I'll address them.